We are back at the OATI Energy Conference 2024 in Las Vegas. I'm John Engel, Editor-in-Chief of Distributech and Power Grid International, joined by Barbara Sugg, the CEO of Southwest Power Pool, SPP. Thank you so much for being here, Barbara.
Thanks for having me.
So in your keynote comments earlier this morning, you were talking a lot about this paradigm shift that we've seen in the energy industry and how quickly it's happening too in these last few years with load growth and data centers and AI and all of these kind of converging storylines. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing not only SPP, but grid operators across the country?
Well, there's kind of a multi-pronged view of it, right? One is we really have to try to get a handle on the load growth itself. We know that many of our member companies are being sought out for development for data centers, and it could be crypto mining, it could be AI. We also have quite a bit of load growth in the areas of the Bakken area in the Dakotas and the Permian Basin, also that we're seeing additional load growth in. But with the data center growth, there's so many questions because it's kind of non-traditional load growth. So how long is it going to stay? How much does it really need? How many other utilities are they shopping around with? We're seeing the growth in a lot of different places. Do the data center developers, do they have a need for clean energy, for just renewable sources? And how willing are they to be have demand response programs in place, whether it gets them better rates or helps us do our balancing? But so there's so many questions around the load itself. We're seeing more load growth at a rate faster than I've seen in my 35 years in the industry. So understanding the load is one of the challenges. The flip side of that is the supply side, the generation side. And we're seeing more and more retirements of generation of some of the fossil fuel generators for a lot of reasons, environmental reasons, financial reasons. Does the market really support the fossil generation, or let's just call it the dispatchable generation, right? It's more expensive to produce than wind energy. And so within SPP, we've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of wind on our system. By a factor of 10 over the last decade or so. And we've also seen quite a bit of a decrease in the coal. The gas seems to be holding pretty steady, and we're seeing a little bit of now starting to see new investments in gas. But how do we have enough of a blend of resources that we are meeting resource adequacy requirements and able to handle some of the extreme weather events? Because the challenge is exacerbated by the weather events, whether it's extreme heat. I mean, gosh, we're in a resource advisory right now in SPP at the end of October due to extreme heat, generators being offline for maintenance, increasing load. We've got to make sure that everybody is paying attention and able to bring the resources to the table that we need. But they're not all dispatchable. It is really quite a perfect storm.
What a time to be retiring. There's nothing going on, so I mean, I guess it's never a good time.
There's never been nothing going on since I joined, especially since I came to SPP. Never been without challenges. It's been so exciting and rewarding, and I've had a front row seat to all of it. It's been amazing.
You shared this really cool thing that you do with your employees before every meeting. You start with a top 10 list as just a level setter of here's where my head's at, here's what we need to be prioritizing, here's what may be in store in the future. Think about your top 10 list of the energy transition and what we might be missing in terms, we get distracted as a group, I think, by the shiny object. And we talked a lot about DERMS at this conference. There's green hydrogen's another nice shiny thing out there. What do you think we're not paying enough attention to?
Well, that's a great question. We're not paying attention enough to the attributes that we need, that a grid operator would need to manage the system. What are those system attributes that we need? How do we come up with the market mechanisms to incent not just the development of those resources, but the use of them in the market? And I think there are additional market opportunities that we have to continue to look at. And we're just not there yet on the market side. It's hard to compete with free energy that, it's, almost free coming out of the wind farms. And we have so much wind in SPP. There are times when it's produced well over 90% of our generation at points in time. I don't think we're not coordinating enough yet on load forecasting. Our members forecast their loads. We do load forecasting in the short term, but really the longer term load forecasting. And I think there's more of a partnership role for the independent system operators like SPP to do with their members. And so that's something that we're saying this is not something we've done enough of, but as a region, as the grid operator, we need to have a better handle on the load. What type of load? Where is it coming? What are people really projecting to happen? So we've got to work on that. There's effort focused on renewable or clean energy sources that could be dispatchable. Battery is great for a very short period of time. Don't know how well it perform in extreme conditions. Don't know how well it will perform after about 4 hours. So what is that next technology going to be, and how are we going to incorporate it, and how do we incent? The SPP is resource agnostic. We don't own any of these assets. How do we incent our members to make the investments that they need? And clearly through planning reserve margins and other things that require them to meet resource adequacy needs. But outside of that, how quickly are we coming up to speed with technologies to replace traditional dispatchable generation? And or technologies to make traditional dispatchable generation clean. There's a little bit of a tug of war that's happening on that side that is very difficult. One of our members, several of them, referred to the balance of power, and that just requires a tremendous amount of effort and hopefully an understanding in DC, in fact, of what it really takes to keep the lights on reliably.
I want to pull on this thread of collaboration a little bit, and maybe the better word is coordination, because you've seen SPP evolve in the couple of decades that you've spent there. How do you think about? You talked about the variability and how we forecast load. There's variability in how we track reliability and resilience. We don't necessarily have an industry-wide, nationwide standard for some of these things. What is the role of SPP and other grid operators in being that glue, even if it isn't your core function or core responsibility to help, get all of those entities rowing in the same direction? I'm curious if you've thought about that.
Well, there are a lot of different paths we can go down there. Part of it would be collaborating with our members, our stakeholders, our generator owners, our load-serving entities, our independent power producers, our transmission developers, and understanding the right balance of generation, transmission, load. And SPP has such a storied past working with our stakeholders that in such a collaborative way that it absolutely is part of the not-so-secret sauce about SPP. And so I think there's a lot of collaboration that has to continue there, because what we don't want is, as the grid operator, we don't want to be in a position where we're just telling our members what's going to happen and what we're going to do. And it's just not how we work. And so collaboration and through the relationships that we built is so fundamental about SPP. But I think there's also collaboration with the federal agencies and government agencies as well, EPA, for example. And in fact, we hosted EPA for a visit just a month or so ago. And because we felt like for them to be effective in creating the rules that they need to make, they need to understand the impact of those rules and see what happens on a day-to-day basis. And so to me, that's a real collaborative opportunity to help those that are making rules understand how complying with those rules or being impacted by those rules would work, and how much it would cost, and and how it really works in the real world. And I think sometimes, they're focused on policy and they don't necessarily have as much opportunity to see what's happening or what the impacts of that would be. And I think just the ability to collaborate with them and the openness and willingness to learn, for us to learn what's driving the needs and the changes, and for them to want to partner with us on how to do that most effectively. I just think that comes from building relationships with trust and respect, and understand that everybody has a job to do. And as I mentioned this morning, climate change is real. It doesn't matter what side of the political divide you're on, that the climate is changing. There's way too many facts to show that. We have to do something about it. And I appreciate that the electric utility industry takes that very seriously. Across the board, there's lots of debate about how to do it, what's the right pace of it, but it's only going to be through continued discussion and learning and collaboration that we'll get there.
I had an executive at PG&E tell me that internally they call it climate change done.
Yeah.
Like it's already changed.
But it's continuing to change.
Well, and you see that, and you mentioned Winter Storm Uri, I think, in your comments. I was in Texas for that, so definitely experienced that. And more recently, Helene, now living in Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh my gosh.
You see these events, and you mentioned these are not 100-year storms anymore.
That's right.
They're annual storms.
We retired the word unprecedented.
It's baffling.
Yes.
It really is. And it shows you the impact that this industry has and the value in day-to-day actions and initiatives. Yep. It wouldn't be an energy interview or discussion without talking about AI. So we do have to close with that.
Okay.
We talked, and I think it's fascinating to me how this industry is exposed to AI, because on one side, you have this load growth story and data center demand, which we addressed a little bit. And then on the other side, you have these tools that are enabled by AI that could really revolutionize how we think about grid operations and customer engagement, forecasting, interconnection, all these different things. How are you thinking about, even in the near term, AI's impact on utilities, grid operators, and when will we see that penetration really take shape?
That's a great question. The when. My eyes are really big right now as I think about AI. And as a former IT person, recovering IT person, lifelong IT person, I'm really excited. We've been talking about AI since I was in college in the early 80s, and yet never really thought about the impact it would have. And I am absolutely convinced that AI will have as much impact on us over the next decade as cell phones have had on us, or the internet had on. This is such a technological revolution that keeps coming in waves, and we've seen it, and it totally adapts the way that we work. And, there's a lot of people that thought, I don't need a cell phone. I don't, and now nobody can live without it. I can't live without my Apple Watch, And I think about AI, there are things that operators do, a lot of work that operators do that requires judgment and discretion. And I'm maybe a little more pessimistic about that being replaced with AI, but a lot of the work that the operators do, critical work, doesn't involve, it involves research. It involves analysis of data. That's an opportunity for AI to make their life a lot easier, so that not easier actually, it's to really focus more time on the more complex stuff that requires judgment. I actually think the smarter we get with AI, the more we're going to realize and see its ability to be more than just a super duper Google search or Siri quest, but instead something that's really thinking for us. And the amount of investment that's being put into that right now is insane. And so, we're seeing the data centers, we're seeing, Google's one of our member companies, and we're seeing the amount of investment that they're putting into AI. Everybody wants to be, the providers want to bring that best AI tool. SPPs, we've got a strike force internally. We've been dabbling with it and trying to figure out what's the best place for it. We also have cybersecurity concerns, though. The electric utility industry does a really good job of protecting our assets, particularly our critical infrastructure. And AI is going to have to come along a little bit farther before we're going to see it within the crown jeweled areas of the electric utility industry, but it's coming. It is absolutely coming. We would be in complete denial, in my opinion, if we didn't see that coming and support that. This is a technology that's coming. Let's not fight it. Let's figure out how to benefit from it. Let's figure out how to develop it further. We're using it some now on the business side to help us get answers quicker. I really hope one day, and our planning engineers are excited and share the same vision that I do, that generator interconnection request studies don't take 2 years or 18 months or 12 months or, even right now, I think developers would be thrilled with 12 months.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see how that can't work ultimately in a day. And so I may be retired, but I will be watching so that I can say, yep, I thought that was going to happen. Not that I came up with it at all, but I think it has the ability to make that big of a change for the utilities.
And there are a couple of companies that just landed a bunch of GRIP funding too from the Department of Energy. I think Grid Unity might even work with SPP. I'm not sure if they do. They've got a contract with CAISO, Southern California Edison, others, and that's their dream to get it there. Last question. I lied about that being the last question because you gave me too much on the AI stuff. But today in the conversations I have with utilities and grid operators, I hear that the application of AI today is mostly back office, like you were talking about, some data analytics to process, and how we do more mundane tasks. And then customer engagement wise, LLM, language learning models and chatbots and things like that. The vendor community is trepidatious about shipping a product that touches grid operations and involves AI. I've had those conversations with the big guys who are saying, we're not shipping until we know 100% that it works, because otherwise we're dead in the water because you can't deal with faulty software.
That's right.
So when do you think we'll get there? Or how do we even try some of those things given the risks to reliability and safety?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately,
someone else's problem.
No, we have reliability standards around cybersecurity to protect that critical infrastructure. And you can't even use cloud computing at all right now within your SIP areas, within your most, your systems most needed for reliability. Those standards are will be in need of massive change to allow companies to use some of those technologies, which means the companies that develop those technologies are going to have to be able to ensure the accuracy and the security of it before there's any hope to ever put that in somebody's control room. And until that happens and the standards change as well to allow the adoption of it, we're not going to see it in the control rooms. But I do predict that we will, that it's just a matter of time. It's technology. It's changing. It's going to keep changing. 5 years from now, we're going to be talking about something else because AI is going to be a given.
Barbara Sugg, CEO of SPP, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.